Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. My Prehm, Erik Skopil, Jared Mack on this preview edition of Oregon, number one ranked Ducks, 8-0, going to the Big House, taking on the defending national champion Michigan Wolverines. 12:30 Pacific time kickoff, another week in a row, second straight week with CBS's top crew, Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson, Jenny Dell on the call. Just the sixth time these two programs have met. Oregon has won the last two. College football has drastically changed since these teams have last played back in 2007. I mean, think about that. Like 52%, 55% completion percentage by a quarterback was viewed as like elite. Today, that's terrible. Spread offenses were just a thing, just starting out. But nonetheless, two different programs coming into Eugene, or coming into Ann Arbor and going in kind of different directions. Michigan trying to salvage its season. This would be certainly a salvage, upsetting the number one team in the country. I don't know how many Duck fans 15, 20 years ago would have believed that Oregon would be a 2-score favorite and the number one ranked team going into Ann Arbor. But here we are. And it's a team where like this feels like Michigan's going to challenge Oregon. It will be tough. They have a bunch of NFL dudes, especially on the defense side of the football. They've maybe got some of the best players at their respective positions in college football on the defensive side of the football. But this feels like a game where it'll be a test. But if Oregon plays its A game and plays well, they should come out of this with more than just like a win by the skin of their teeth. They should kind of pull away.
Yeah, one thing, Matt, you said 10 to 12 years ago. I think 10 to 12 months ago, we would have been surprised had Oregon been 14-point favorites over Michigan, especially considering what Michigan was this last year. But yeah, I agree with you on that point. I think one thing that, maybe gets lost because of the record, and when you watch Michigan, it doesn't look very good, especially on offense, is this is still a team with a lot of championship pedigree, right? Like the coaching staff has changed a little bit, but Sharon Moore was a big part of the team last year that went on to win the national championship. The guys that you're talking about on defense, those players were part of a championship team last year, crucial pieces in some cases. So you do have the remainder still, the skeleton at least of a championship team and a lot of pride, and this is at their place. And as you said, there's just going to be a lot of external factors. I think that if you're looking for a path for Michigan to somehow win or play competitive, are going to be more important than some of the on-field parts of this. Like, does the travel catch up is a thing I heard Josh Pate talking about. I don't know if I necessarily am all that concerned, but this is the second time in 3 weeks that we're going to be flying across the country to play a football game. Does that have any lingering effects? And then, what we talked about, you're playing in a 110,000 person stadium. Poncho yesterday was talking about how he'd never done that before. Like, that's going to be on players' minds, and you're going against a team that at least has, recently been very, very successful in a program that has a lot of pride. So those are kind of the external intangibles that could put a little bit extra strain maybe on the visitors here. But as we'll get to when we kind of talk through the matchups on the field, I just continue to feel really good about that part of this game. And it's hard for me to see that external stuff outweighing some of the stuff on the field that to me just feels like it really, heavily favors the Ducks.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if Oregon gets up 14-0, maybe, like 21-7 early on in this game, it's going to be, rather difficult for Michigan to come back and, put themselves in a position to win. It's an offense that really isn't built for explosive plays unless it's playing a poor rush defense. Clell Mullings and Donovan Edwards, the two running backs in Michigan, are very, very, very talented and two of the better ones that Oregon will see all year long. Probably third on the list behind Gentine and Travion and Quinshon Judkins at Ohio State. But the quarterback situation, I think, is probably the first thing we should dive into, because I think it's the most notable situation maybe across college football, just because of how dire it is there up in Ann Arbor. I truly think that if the quarterback situation at Michigan were, 50% better, this would be like a top 15 matchup between these two teams because of how good Michigan's defense is. But, they don't get the chance to, kind of pin their ears back and run after the quarterback on defense, just because they're out there a lot. There are not a lot of successes on the other side of the football for Michigan and their offense. They have not thrown for over 208 yards in any game this entire season. They've had multiple games with under 100 passing yards. They have more interceptions and touchdowns thrown. The trio of quarterbacks, Jack Tuttle, Alex Orji, and Davis Warren, have thrown for a combined 1,044 yards. And Jack Tuttle actually just recently retired due to a concussion and an ulnar collateral ligament issue in his right elbow. So this is not what you would call a potent passing attack, to say the least. And on the flip side for Oregon, this is great because this is one of the best secondaries you've had in probably the last 5 or 6 years. The only thing that comes to mind of comparable is the 2019 team, where you have now 3 NFLers and other guys who were drafted on that team as well. So I mean, it's a very, very favorable matchup for Oregon in terms of the passing offense. It just comes down to, can Oregon stop Edwards and Mullings on the ground, which is, no easy order. Like, those two are really good players, and that has been a positive for Michigan this year, is their ability to run the ground behind their offensive line. But it's also been a pretty good positive for Oregon as their rush defense this season in certain games. But they were really good last week against Illinois. They were really good against Ohio State. They might have had a little slip up against Purdue, but overall in the season they've been really good against the run. You're on mute, Matt.
Got some technical difficulties on Matt's end, so he will momentarily be, figuring that part out while we continue our look ahead to the Oregon-Michigan game on Saturday. I don't know where Matt was going to go next, unfortunately, with where his head was. You had just talked quarterback for Michigan and how that could and probably will play a big impact in their ability to be competitive in this game. Obviously, that's the case. I think, just kind of sticking on that side of the ball a little bit, and the two of us did a lot of this yesterday. But one thing I don't know if we got into as much as with the Michigan run game, I really think it's limiting explosive plays there too. Because you look at the way, there's one clear example of USC beats Michigan if Khalil Mullings doesn't have a 74-yard run or whatever that was. Basically backed up on their own goal line with a couple minutes to go, takes it all the way down there. They end up scoring, going ahead, winning the game. But just in general, when I look at this Michigan offense, I think you're probably not thrilled with Michigan having 6-minute drives or anything like that. But I also think you'd probably be okay if the outcome of their drive is they take a lot of time, they don't have any explosives, and it ends with a field goal or something like that. I think you're going to be kind of okay going, well, if they're going to just kind of make this ugly and muck this up a little bit, that's going to be not ideal for Oregon to get to its number offensively, but you're probably still in a decent shape. I just think you want to avoid seeing what Mullings did, especially against USC, because he had a couple explosive. He had the one for the touchdown from about 45 yards. We know Edwards has been capable of doing that too. And so I think that's another part of it that I don't know if we talked about on our Wednesday show much, is just limiting the explosives. We know that through the air, other than Loveland, there's really not much of a threat, but on the ground, they've proven to be a run offense that's capable of kind of gashing you. And I think you want to limit that. And kind of maybe it's a little bit of the Ohio State game plan defensively. It's a little bit of the Illinois game plan, probably just in general. I think these teams are, from a strengths and weaknesses perspective, somewhat comparable in terms of Illinois and Michigan in terms of what they do and don't do very well. I know obviously Illinois had the ability to pass a little bit better, but big running backs want to slam it between the tackles. That's kind of where their bread and butter is. And so again, if you're Oregon, avoid the explosive plays. And obviously you just want to shut them down, period. But if they're going to have an extended drive here or there, I think you can take that as long as you can win situational football around the goal line. Is he back with success? Are we ready?
I think I'm back.
All right. I was just talking nonsense about the Michigan run game. So go ahead and pick up wherever you'd like.
I'm at a loss for what happened there. What I was going to say was just how Jared brought up how bad Michigan's pass game was. They have 4 quarterbacks on their roster, and in their career, they've thrown 14 touchdown passes. Dylan Gabriel's thrown 18 this season. So what I was trying to say was, to Jared's point of when he talked about stopping the run game, that is how you win this game. That is how you get there. And I think that probably the best example of success or lack of success comes from the USC game, where Michigan got the ball, I think, late in the game with like 4 or 5 minutes to go, I think inside their own 20. And every single play was a run play, and they got all the way down to the USC side of the field into their red zone and scored a touchdown with like 40 seconds left. And it literally, that's like the description of how you stop or don't stop Michigan, is if you can stop the run game and force them to physically pass the football because they are terrible at it, that's the path of success. But if we've seen, though, that this team has the patience and has the ability to go the length of the football field in the most pressure situations and be successful. And it ultimately comes down to kind of almost like, what can you do in the phone booth? Can you win at the line of scrimmage? And I'll be curious to see just how much Oregon dares Michigan to throw. Like, do they basically go 8 guys in the box and a high safety and 2 corners to dare you to throw the football?
They might. I mean, I'm sure they'll stack the box every once in a while, just because it's gonna be an advantage this game. And that kind of goes in line like with my next point, is like the Oregon's physicality needs to be at its very best. And it's one of the Big Ten teams that, from coming over from the Pac-12, that has actually had physicality, where they're not being overrun by opponents, regardless if it's Michigan or Illinois or Purdue. They've stepped up to the competition so far, but out physicaling their opponents has been Michigan's key to victory over the past couple of seasons. And in this specific instance, I don't think it's going to be anything different. Like, that's what Michigan has done to Ohio State the last couple of years, where it's a closely contested game. They're pounding the rock, and eventually Ohio State's defense has just been so tired and so driven like out of the trenches that they break off these big runs. Donovan Edwards goes for a big run, or Blake Corum, when he was there, went for a big run. Like, that's been their motive and their plan of attack in some of these big games. And it's always helped, obviously, to have like a quarterback who can throw the ball in case there is a situation where it's 3rd and long that they don't have this year. But I'll be like, that's going to be one of the first things I watch on both sides of the ball, is like, who's getting the push up front? Like, is Oregon's defensive line working their way against Michigan's offensive line? Is it even? It's Michigan's offensive line working Oregon's defensive line, and then the flip side for defense versus offense for when Oregon has the ball. So I just think I have no doubt in my mind that Dan Lanning's team is going to step up physicality wise. They've done it all the time, even when there's been some question marks, like, are they physical enough to go against Utah? Like Eric and I talked about on Wednesday's podcast. Like, are they physical enough to go against Ohio State? Like, every time there's been a check box. And that even dates back to Mario Cristobal in 2021 against Ohio State the first time around. So I think they'll be fine, but that is Michigan's plan of attack. That has been their plan of attack the last couple of seasons, and I don't think that'll change this year.
Yeah, and I guess it's just, to me, this comes down to, can Michigan make this a rock fight? Like, I think it's pretty much that simple. Like, can Michigan make this a game where Oregon is unable to, for whatever reason, get out to a quick lead? I mean, we've seen this team. I think this has been the most impressive part of the run, really, since Boise State. But think about how against Oregon State, even against UCLA, Michigan State, but certainly against Purdue, and then most recently Illinois, how Oregon just got out to a quick start and just kind of ended things early. Just kind of was like, okay, you guys have some hope over there on your sideline. Now you don't have any because you're down a couple of scores early. I just think if you're Oregon and you can get to that point, again, this game is basically over. But if you're Michigan, the idea is this might be a game where you want the ball first if you're Michigan. I mean, there's not many games where I think that's the case, but this might be one where you want the ball first. You go down. If you can create a lead and force Oregon to chase a little bit early here, you give yourself a bit of a chance, and you get that defense especially a bit of a chance. And I really think, like, if this game is going to be competitive in the fourth quarter, it's going to be in large part because of Michigan's defensive front. And we talked about this a ton yesterday, so I don't want to go over it a whole lot, but their best path to victory is just they muddy everything up for Oregon on offense. Oregon can't run between the tackles. Gabriel has internal pressure in his face all the time. Will Johnson plays and eliminates one of the receivers or makes it, just kind of diminishes what Evan Stewart or Tez Johnson or Trayshawn Holden or whoever he is on the field kind of diminishes that player, and everything's just more difficult than it has been all year. And I don't buy into the fact that Michigan can really do that for 4 full quarters, because they haven't been able to necessarily do that even against lesser offenses than Oregon. But that would be their path to success. It's just make this an ugly game, make this a game where it's 21-17, and you see if Oregon's able to make the plays at the end. And I will say, frankly, if this does come down to which team can execute late on offense in a close game, that's favorable. That's very favorable Oregon too, because you've got the edge at quarterback. I think you have the edge at skill players on offense. So you almost have to find a situation where Oregon legitimately just can't do anything on offense. I just am so not buying into that being the outcome on Saturday.
Real quick for my storyline, because we need to get back on track from schedule wise. I just think first down is going to be important. Michigan in their wins have averaged 5.29 yards per play on first down. And the games that they've lost this season, it's just under 4 at 3.96. And it's staying on schedule defensively, or for Michigan offensively. If Oregon can consistently force Michigan into 2nd and 9 or 3rd and 10, that's just going to be a recipe for eventual turnovers or punts at worst, and you get the ball back and you drive down the field. And it goes in line with both your guys' storylines of, Oregon's interior group matching up with Michigan's and whatnot. But I just think first down success for both teams will be a clear indicator of who is in a position to win. Because if you're always having to come back and convert first downs and extend drives and it having to be as hard as possible, eventually that will crack, and eventually you will make a mistake. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll dive into our predictions here for this weekend's game. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles podcast. Erik still in first place. I'm in second. Jared is in third. 4 points is all that separates Erik to Jared. So anyone's game here from a moving ranking standpoint. Erik, why don't you go first? You had team props for this week.
Sure. Yeah. Glad to be in first place still. Happy to hear that. As longtime listeners know, that's not usually the case. So I'll take it. So the first one I have here, 2.5 Oregon plays of 30 or more yards. I chose the under, and part of this is I don't know if Oregon's going to be able to get many of these on the ground. And I've also noticed a trend when Oregon goes on the road, they're not quite as aggressive vertically through the air. So I just kind of wonder if they're going to take many shots. That doesn't mean I think the offense is going to have a hard day, because we'll get to score predictions later. I think they're going to be fine, but I don't know if there'll be many explosives. So I took the under.
I guess I'll go. I took the over at 2.5, so I'm thinking 3. I actually think Oregon's speed on the perimeter is going to be similar to what it was for Illinois outside of Will Johnson. And the lack of safety depth, I think you're not going to be able to guard Michigan. Will Johnson won't be able to guard Tez and Evan Stewart at the same time. So I think one of them will be going deep, and they'll connect on a couple of these that will go for 2.5. We'll go for 30 or more yards.
Yeah, I took the over. I think 3 is totally reasonable for what we're going to do. And I think they could get one on the ground. It hasn't really happened this year on the ground for Jordan James and Noah Whittington, but both of those guys have seemed to be breaking free a little bit the last couple of games, and they've had some bigger runs. But I still think that, again, this is a 15-yard pass to Tez Johnson, who makes one guy miss, and boom, there you go. You already got one. So I'm gonna play the odds that Oregon gets at least two or three of them, or at least 3, excuse me.
How about 1.5 Michigan players attempting a pass? I was looking into this. This has basically been every game for Michigan. Even last week, Orji, by the way, didn't attempt a pass, but Donovan Edwards did. So they got to 2 that way. I took the over, but I will be curious to see, and this is kind of part of the reason I wanted to include this one with Orji in particular. He's going to play, and last week he was their leading rusher, but I'm curious to see how much misdirection is there, because when he goes in the field, you're like, okay, this is just going to be probably a quarterback draw, some sort of designed quarterback run. do they let him pass a little bit to kind of catch Oregon off guard? That's something I'm kind of keeping an eye on.
I went over. I just think it's going to happen with when you play two quarterbacks, the trick plays. We're going to see all the funkiness from their offense. So give me the over.
Yeah, I took the over too. Whether it is a trick play or whether it's Alex Orji throwing, which, given his skill set, that could also be considered a trick play. Like, I just think it'll happen
Right.
eventually.
Yeah, that's my thinking too. Okay, over under 1.5 combined tackles for loss for Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. I looked at this. This is basically what they're averaging per game is about 1.5 together. So I felt like this is an appropriate line. I also went over just because I think these guys are going to be real hyped up for this game. Just to, like, if Oregon annihilates Michigan, which I think is very much in the cards, and ultimately we'll get to predictions, that might be what I think will happen. I just think that's going to be something that's going to be really hard to swallow for this group. And I think you're going to see these guys come out real motivated early and maybe wreck some drives. So I took the over.
I went under. I kind of feel like Oregon's going to scheme it up where it's just going to be hard for these two guys to get opportunities unless they just completely shed Nishad Strother and throw him to the side to get right into the backfield right away, which could very well happen. Like, by the way, like, they're that good. And that's not a slight to Strother or Marcus Harper or Poncho. But I just think Oregon's going to kind of play into, hey, you guys are so good here. We're just going to go away from you so you can't even make a play. So I went under.
I went over. These are the kind of guys, the kind of players that just kind of fall into tackles for losses, meaning they're just that good where they're always in the backfield. They always have an opportunity. It's kind of similar to what Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell have done this season, where they're kind of always in the backfield, and it's just whether or not they make tackles. So I think they'll make a couple tackles and get a couple tackles for loss. So I went over the 1.5. All right, I continue to talk. Offensive individual prop bets, just 3 of those here. First one, over under 7.5 catches for Tez Johnson. I went under here. This one feels more like, hoping you hit a specific card in blackjack, because I think it's going to be like a 6 or 7 catch game. Just I don't see the 8 catch game coming in. So I am hoping it's, it's sub 8 going on here.
We're just kind of flipping a coin with this, aren't we? Because this is very much within the realm of what Tez averages. So I went over. Just a hunch. I don't know. I mean, again, and part of it is like, what is the game script like? Because if this is a game where Oregon's up a lot, we saw last week Tez had 6 catches. That would be the under. That was a game that was decided, and the first team offense wasn't really involved in much of the second half, especially the fourth quarter. If that's the case again, maybe the under is a better play, but I'm still going over here just because this is very much within the realm of Tez's capability.
It's one I'm not confident in, but I'm going under. Reasoning being Evan Stewart's increasing his production, his targets. Trayshawn Holden's back. Justice Lowe has now kind of forced his way into the rotation. Tez's snap counts were down a little bit last week. I think that was partly score and partly saving him for this week, but nonetheless, it was still down a little bit. But I just think this is one of those games where so much attention is going to go to Tez, and you want to, from Michigan's side, and you want to give your best playmaker the football, no doubt, but play into that. Like, they're going to focus so much, and so maybe it's a fake screen to Tez and goes the other direction or some kind of action. So I think under, but it's like I will say he's going to catch 7 passes. This is just right on the nose, right on the nose.
Very good. Next one up, over under half an interception for Dylan Gabriel. So basically, will Dylan Gabriel throw an interception or not? I went on the over. I think he'll throw an interception. He's just, sometimes he gets a little squirrely with it, tries to fit in some tight windows. This is a really good secondary. And if Will Johnson is playing, that increases the odds even more. It wouldn't shock me at all if DG went 290 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. But I don't know. I think he just gets caught one time. Maybe it's just a batted ball. Maybe it's a tip drill and somebody catches it. So I'm going with the over half an interception here.
Yeah, I am too. 4 out of 5 games with at least 1 interception over in this last, I guess in Big Ten play. Didn't have any in non-conference. Has been a little bit more turnover prone. It's just been kind of like, I feel like he doesn't have a ton of interceptable passes in general. It's just when he does make the mistake, it goes the other way. And so I'll just expect that there's going to be one that's sort of weird this week, and the trend continues where he throws an interception.
I think that's either going to be extremely deep shots by Dillon Gabriel, or it's going to be quick game. And maybe the deep shots lead to opportunities for interceptions. But I think I'm taking the under. So I don't think he throws one. I think we get a good Dillon Gabriel game, which could still happen with an interception. But I think this will be one of those moments where 12:30 game against a primetime blue as of blood type program in Michigan. It's November. Heisman talk is up. They're not obviously like gearing everything to pump Gabriel up, but that just feels like one of those moments where, hey, he's going to cement himself as one of the finalists for the Heisman this weekend. So I'm taking the under. I'm thinking a really big game by Gabriel.
All right, final offensive prop bet. Over under 85.5 rushing yards for Jordan James. I went over here, not 100% confident. This kind of feels like the number for James. Like he's hit 100 yards a couple of times, but in the recent weeks he's been, I wouldn't say limited, but I would say that he's kind of taken some reps off. Kind of talked about it this week where he was going, 20, 25 carries a game for a while. Noah Whittington looks better. DeJuan Riggs looked pretty good in the last game against Illinois. Jaden Lamar's kind of cemented himself as the number 3 running back in this rotation. So I don't know if he's going to get the number of carries it'll take to get 86 yards, but I said over anyways.
I think we see a return to a bigger snap count, or a bigger split of the carries, I guess. I mean, UCLA, Michigan State, Ohio State, 20 carries, 24 carries, 23 carries. And then Foote kind of came off the gas there the last couple. 10 against Purdue, 15 against Illinois. I think that might have been somewhat intentional from, hey, we're going to use him a lot early on here. Now that we have an opportunity, may take a bit of a break. I'm not saying the competition was terrible the last 2 weeks, but Michigan's a little bit of a different animal. I think that might have been intentional. They're going to ride him a little bit more on Saturday. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets more than 20 carries in this game. And given that his yards per carry average has not dipped below 5 in a single game this year, I think 85.5 is very doable for him.
Yeah, I'm with Erik's logic. I think the last couple of weeks they've been saving him, keeping him fresh for this game. This might be a heavy workload for Jordan and Noah. I'm confident that 85 or I guess 86 yards will be hit by Jordan James. But I will say I think this will probably be his lowest yard per carry average of the season. It might be he gets there by volume than I guess quantity. Okay, defensive line props, which was me. Over under 7.5 tackles for loss by Oregon's defense. This is kind of right around what they do. I'm taking the over simply because I think there's going to be a ton of opportunities with Michigan's run game, and I understand their offensive line is pretty good. They're physical, point at the tackle. So is Oregon's. To steal a line and inverse it from Rashad Stroller of this will be a good test for us, but this will be a good test for them too, is essentially kind of what he said with the offense versus defensive matchup. But I think you flip it around. I'm taking 7.5 tackle. I'm taking 8 tackles for loss for Oregon's defense. Maybe a couple sacks, but I think there's going to be a lot of run opportunities for the loss of 1 yard.
Yeah, I'm going under on this one. I think if the line were a little lower, I might go over, but 8 to me feels like a whole lot. And Quell Mullings and Donovan Edwards are tough people to tackle. Mullings is a former linebacker. I think he's listed at 6'1", 233 pounds. That's a big boy at running back. I think if there are going to be a lot of tackles for loss, it'll come more on pass plays and or sacks or something like that, or just just a play that doesn't work and Oregon kind of blows it up. I just think it's going to be hard to tackle these guys for an absolute loss. I think there's going to be chances for it for sure, as there always are when Oregon's defensive line lines up, but I just think it's going to be hard, so I went with the under here.
This is a tough one for me because I agree with Jared on the surface. That feels like a lot. I'm looking at it right now. Oregon's had 7 tackles for loss 3 times, and then they had 10 against Purdue, but they haven't been over 7 aside from the Purdue game. So the number seems large. And then I also think Michigan's been pretty dysfunctional offensively, and like if that continues, this defense is certainly capable of getting back there and making a bunch of plays. But I ultimately went under. I do think that like if it was 6.5, maybe that's going to be an over for me. But I think 8's maybe one too high.
Over under, excuse me, 1.5 Oregon players with 9 or more tackles. Doesn't really matter who it is. They don't have to be tackles for loss. It's just 9 or more tackles. Oregon has had 3 games this season where they've had 2 or more players finish a game with 8. I think this will be the most opportunity Oregon's defense will face this season to have that to take 9 or more tackles by 2 guys. I'm taking the over. Don't know really who it could be, but I just think this is a game where a lot of Oregon's bigger named players, their better run defense players, will play a bunch. And just by pure volume of opportunity, 2 guys will have 9 or more tackles.
Yeah, I went under here. I think like 18 combined tackles at least between 2 people is a lot.
It is.
I also kind of wonder if Michigan will have enough plays for those 2 guys to get that many tackles. That was kind of going through my head. Last week, Tyshim Johnson had 10 tackles, but Illinois was, moving the ball through the air and going sideline to sideline more than I think what Michigan will do. And to have both guys do it, maybe it is like Jeff and Bryce who are 10 and 10 who combined for 20 tackles. But with how much Oregon kind of rotates their linebackers and their defensive interior, like I just didn't see it. So I went under.
I went over, but my internal debate was basically Matt's argument for the over and Jared's for the under. And like, because like offensively, Michigan's probably like the least diverse offense. So I could see 2 inside linebackers just teeing off and getting a ton of tackles. But then to Jared's point, like if that's the case, like, are you even running enough plays to get to 18 for 2 players? So, but I took the over. They did it last week against Illinois. I know that, as Jared said, that's kind of a different game. But I do think like there's certainly this is a game where there could be a linebacker or 2 that have really large tackle numbers, just because that's going to be the way Michigan attacks you, and you kind of go into the game knowing that. And also like who is going to be on Colston Loveland? It could be the same kind of personnel there, and he's such a fixture in the pass game. So I guess my thinking is that the same kind of players are going to be involved in pretty much everything Michigan's running, but it is a large number. I agree, but I took the over.
All right. The next one, over under 1.5 Michigan turnovers in this game. Michigan has 15 total turnovers, and 8 of those have come in their 3 losses. They turned it over 3 times against Texas, twice against Washington, and then most recently in their last loss to Illinois, they turned it over 3 times. I'm banking on the fact that Oregon's offense will score enough points to kind of force Michigan to be risky and have to take chances, and then Oregon's defense on winning on first down consistently to force them into some difficult situations that they're not comfortable in, which will lead to 2 turnovers. So I'm taking the over.
I went the over here as well. I genuinely feel like every time Michigan is going to drop back to pass, there could be an interception or a chance at it. I just think that this is a really good matchup pass-wise for Oregon. This is a quarterback who's not the best, and this is a defense that has proved to be one of the better pass defenses in the country against some receiving targets who are fine. Who I think that there's some talent out there, but unless they're going to Loveland, like every single passing play, and he's just going to use his height advantage on whoever is covering, whether it's Tyshim or Brandon Johnson or whoever it is. I just think that there's going to be a chance, and I don't expect Edwards or Mullings to fumble, but you never know. Could be a thing. Strip sack, who knows?
Yeah, a couple of interceptions feel very, very reasonable in this game, so I took the over, just based upon what Michigan's track record has been at that position.
All right, rapid fire here. Quick score predictions. I've gone back and forth of the margin. I think this is a total system failure for Oregon for them to lose. It just doesn't set up right for Michigan to win this game. So I basically am banking on Oregon's offense getting out to a great start, Oregon's defense winning on first down, and getting, like I said just previously, Michigan into uncomfortable positions and eventually cracks. Oregon pulls away in the second half, 31-14 with the victory.
Yeah, we all have very similar margins here. I have 34-16 Oregon. My point is really, I think there's one path to Michigan winning, or one particularly clear path, and that's just their defense kicks Oregon's butt. I just don't feel like that's the outcome I'm anticipating, and I think Oregon's been just too good across the board. I think they're too deep, they're too talented, they're too well balanced to fall to a team that is so reliant on kind of like a couple of different individual matchups. So I like the Ducks by 18.
Yeah, I've got the same margin. I've got 31-13 Oregon. Like Erik said, all kind of similar. I don't expect this to be a high-scoring game for Oregon. I have a lot of respect for Michigan's defense and what they do. I think it's going to be the same story with Michigan, where their offense just can't do enough and their defense is constantly on the field. And at one point, Oregon might be able to move the ball a good amount of times, or like a big chunk play on the ground, one of those 30-yarders we were talking about earlier, just because they're just kind of gassed. This is a much, much, much different offense than what Michigan is used to seeing. This is way different than what it is against Ohio State, what it is against Illinois, what it has been the last couple of years. And that's kind of been the track record for the Big Ten Conference so far against Oregon, where a lot of these defenses seem slow and all these other things. I think Michigan has very similar athlete level, but I just think Oregon gets it going early, and then that's kind of it.
That's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. Next time you hear from us, it'll be post-game edition. Jared from Michigan. Erik and I will be staying back. Safe travels to Jared to get to Ann Arbor. Good luck on your parking. It's an inside joke there. But nonetheless, next time you hear from us, post-game. Until then, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.